Hello, do you like New Japan Pro Wrestling? Are you a Shin Nihon freak? If so, check out the Super J-Cast with Joel and Damon on the Voices of Wrestling Podcast Network.
And even if you fucking hate New Japan Pro Wrestling, listen to the Super J-Cast anyway. Not just for our great show reviews, analysis, and pastrami sandwiches, but there's also usually some dick jokes somewhere in the obligatory opening 30 minutes of absolute nonsense we chat about every single week. That's the Super J-Cast for all the best talk about New Japan Pro Wrestling, crisps, and pornography.
This podcast is a member of the Voices of Wrestling Podcasting Network. Visit voicesofwrestling.com to hear the rest of our great podcasts, as well as show reviews, columns, opinions, and updates across the world of wrestling.
To the highway in a brand new day. Gotta let it go. Fast to freedom. Stars tonight together. Here everyone is singing. 你看到我就怕，头皮发麻，我的手。
Welcome back to Open the Voice Gate for April 22nd, 2025. We are members of the Voices of Wrestling Podcast Network. You can find us on the Voices of Wrestling Podcast Network feed or on our own dedicated Open the Voice Gate feed on all podcast platforms and applications. You can follow us on social media at Open Voice Gate. If you'd like to donate to the show, click the link in the show notes. It'll take you to our redcircle.com landing site. You click that red box that says sponsor this podcast, and you can set up a one-time or reoccurring donation. No obligation whatsoever, but I would like to thank all of our previous donors. I'm one of your hosts. It's your old pal, Mike Spears, joined alongside, as always, Case Lowe. And Case, we are now apart after, doing our first in-person show and in a lot of ways spending a lot of the last week with each other. How are you doing, bud?
We're a part of each other? Is that what you're saying?
Oh, I mean, like now we're back to normal after.
Back to I got a part, not okay. I
part,
see.
yeah.
I thought I mean, I enjoyed my time. I thought maybe we made a stronger emotional bond than I realized. No, I'm good. It was, off the bat, I had way more fun than I thought I was going to have over the course of Wednesday, Thursday, Friday in Vegas. And it's certainly, I obviously didn't expect to have a bad time or else I wouldn't have gone, but I largely expected to watch some good wrestling and to hang with you and Rich and enjoy myself to some degree. But a ginormous thank you to everybody who came up and said they enjoyed the podcast. A ginormous thank you to everybody that I spent any amount of time with Wednesday, Thursday, Friday, because I had really just, again, more fun than I ever could have imagined. So it was quite nice. I'm very glad I did that. And I'll certainly have my eye on next year's lineup to see if Dragongate returns, and we'll obviously talk about the state of Dragongate USA here. And if it's a lineup that intrigues me, it's a trip that I could see myself making again very easily.
I mean, you've not been to New Orleans, right?
I have not been to New Orleans.
Yeah, no, it's if we ever get to a point where we could say, all right, WWE, screw the site fees. We're going to make you rotate between 4 spots for WrestleMania. Maybe you have one of them be a wild card where you could plug in your Minneapolis's and Dallas's. But I feel like that New Orleans has to be in that rotation, like the Super Bowl rotation proposed.
Yeah, obviously it's a city that people seem to like. It is a little bit on that Vegas front where it's a city where the best things are things people enjoy most about that city are the things that I do not partake in, which is a bit of an uphill battle. But I enjoyed myself in Vegas enough. I could see myself enjoying New Orleans.
Yeah, I mean that is kind of the thing about my idea about WrestleMania weekend sites is that it has to kind of be a little bit of a party city, but you can go in a lot of different directions, and has to be used to having a huge influx of tourists and the buildings and all of that to do that. But yeah, before we get super into it, I want to extend my own personal thanks to everyone who came up to us over the last week, and it was very touching. I had an amazing time. My wife, who is not a wrestling fan whatsoever, had a very good time. She now has a favorite Dragongate wrestler. It is Hio, as I would have guessed. But yeah, no, it was just really great and kind of overwhelming in a sort of way that after Friday night, I know that both of us had Saturday morning plane flights, but I just couldn't hazard going to another show after the Dragon Gate Pro Wrestling Revolution show Friday night.
No, that was one of the things that I was a little bit concerned about going in, because I don't go to a ton of live wrestling anymore, and the live wrestling that I do typically go to at this point are AEW pay-per-views, which, for as good as they are, and I have been in the building for what people consider to be some of the greatest wrestling shows of all time at this point, but I always struggle with the pacing of those shows. Even 6 years into AEW as of basically a month from today, I've never totally been on board with the rhythm of their pay-per-views. They're a bit of a tougher watch for me than a lot of other people. And so I was a little bit worried about, like, okay, I'm going to go to a show Wednesday, and then I'm ideally going to go to 3 on Thursday, and then I'm going to go to 2 or 3 on Friday. And I was really, really worried that by Friday I was going to feel totally burnt out. But the last 2 matches on the Wednesday show were so much fun that it gave me momentum into Thursday. Thursday, I just had such a great time with life that I was ready to go Friday, and then Friday we ended on such a high note with the Dragon Gate PWR show that I'm very glad, just for the sake of enjoyment, that we didn't have any other shows to go to, because I couldn't have imagined ending that trip on a better note.
Yeah, and I feel like on the whole, and there were some people that kind of broke that kind of like unwritten rule, everyone kind of kept to the show times in Vegas, and I felt like that kind of helped a whole lot. At least by and large, people did.
So the only show that happened at a reasonable hour, because I know like the Heels Have Eyes show started way late, but the only thing that seemed to not go according to schedule, I talked about this a little bit with Rich when we did audio on the flagship Patreon, was Thursday we did Pandemonium Pro, which, by the way, credit to Pandemonium Pro. I had a number of reservations about that show going into it, and it ended up being a well-timed, extremely fun show with one really great match on it. But we went from Pandemonium Pro to West Coast Pro, which was right down the street. And just like Pandemonium Pro said they would, they ended the card at a perfect time so you could walk on over and walk in the door for West Coast Pro and be good to go for that show. But as it turned out, Kirk White's Big Time Wrestling went over by like an hour.
Yeah.
Wow. So West Coast Pro started really late. Now, there was a big enough gap between their scheduled start time and the Prestige start time to where that didn't affect anything. We went out, got dinner after West Coast Pro, and then came back and had plenty of time to get to Prestige, and there wasn't any issues there. But yes, Big Time Wrestling is the only one I know of that was radically off schedule, and it backed up the start of West Coast Pro a little bit. But otherwise, yeah, it was... I don't totally know what happened with all of the Pearl Theater shows and their start times. We'll certainly talk a little bit again about the Pearl Theater and the GCW side of the Dragon Gate relationship here. But for somebody that spent a lot of their week at the meet, I thought it went incredibly, incredibly smooth.
Yeah, I feel like as a venue, and especially inside the room, the meet was great. And part of that is that it's a reception hall. So it's great at bouncing noise in the room and not letting it out. So as we get to talking about the Dragon Gate Pro Wrestling Revolution show, that's something that I feel like we'll kind of be harping on a little bit. It does feel like, and I think that at least like my issues with the meet and what seems to be a lot of other people's issues with the meet ended up just being like how they operated the bar and also not allowing any wrestlers to sell merch. Like,
yeah, people were hot about the merch. I spoke to a few different wrestlers throughout the weekend who are wrestling there who were not happy about the merch situation. And the
bar situation was almost as insane as what they were trying to pull for the merch situation.
So I was confused by the setup of the bar anyways. So
Right, yeah.
I was confused as to where it was at and what was going on there, which might make me sound like a moron, but it was just, I wasn't super focused on it. At no point did I feel
Sure.
like, man, I need a drink, but also I was super confused on where everything was.
Yeah, so for those who only watch the streams and were not there, the bar was like in the corner with like an exit door right next to the entrance. It was never kept open until they wanted everyone to leave through that room. And the West Coast Pro promoter was around a bit in the Voices of Wrestling Discord yesterday talking about it. And to even get it to a point that was basically a wedding reception auxiliary bar stand was overly complicated, it seemed, and it also seemed like wildly expensive. My own personal experience with that bar was the fact that my wife wanted to have a Diet Coke because she was like, this show is going much later than I usually stay up for, so I'd like a Diet Coke. And they wouldn't give her the can. They had to pour it into 2 small cocktail glasses, which was just insane with it.
That is strange.
Just seemed like that there are certain things about the meet that was amazing, but a lot of the experience seems to have been better for those who are in the room and watching the shows than anyone else involved.
Great lighting, great sound, a ring that did not seem like it was going to implode at any point during the weekend. I guess big picture, if you're ready to start talking about it, the future of what Dragongate looks. Yeah, the future of what Dragongate looks like in America. And I've got an article coming to voicesofwrestling.com at some point this week. I'm hoping, we're recording this Tuesday, I'm hoping it's out Wednesday. It might be Thursday by the time everybody sees it. I'm having a hard time putting a bow on this on this written piece, but it sort of goes through the last 10 years of Dragongate trying to get back in America, from the final Gabe produced Dragongate USA show to now, because it's been a more hectic journey than I think people realize, between what was going to be the 2019 WrestleMania weekend and then the visa issue that happened there. And then, of course, they announced what seemed like it was going to be a pretty expansive partnership with MLW in 2020. I always mention, something that we were told was that Jacob Fatu was going to be doing Dragongate tours in the summer of 2020. That obviously does not happen. And then, we find ourselves with Shun and Yamato and Game Changer in 2022, and that leads to the excursions of SB Kento and then Estrella, and then Takuma Fujiwara and Takuma Nishikawa from there. And they dipped their toes in the water WrestleMania weekend last year, and then they finally really, I think, made a splash this weekend. But I bring all of that up to say that, when we started having conversations in 2021 and 2022, both with people within Dragongate and then, you and I on this podcast talking about what would it look like if Dragongate were to come back to America. Who do they need to partner with? What do they need to do? What are the wrestlers that need to be over in America? It was a bleaker time for indie wrestling, and I think everybody was swallowing or trying to swallow this very uncomfortable pill of, if Dragongate is going to be in America, they're going to have to be on Game Changer shows, and the fate of their popularity is going to rest partially in the hands of if the Game Changer wrestling fan base cares about them or not. And to me, the biggest win out of these few days in Vegas is not the relaunch of the Dragongate USA brand, which ultimately I don't think means a ton. It's that we now have a second avenue. I think if Dragongate can foster a relationship with Prestige, West Coast Pro, and Deadlock, and then whatever your fringe local indie is, whether it's a PWR, whether it's an ETU on the East Coast, if there's a Florida promotion, because I assume Mania will be back in Florida at some point, there seems like there's hope there. And I never had hope with Game Changer, and sitting in the crowd on that Wednesday show with largely Game Changer fans certainly did not inspire me by any means. But Mike, I don't know. I feel like there's a greater path to success now than there was in 2022 and 2023, when they would fly wrestlers over and they would primarily work Game Changer.
Yeah, I think that, and it's more of a reflection of the US indie landscape than it is uniquely for Dragongate USA. At least with like the people that like I talked to throughout the weekend, especially afterwards, it seems that there's like a big desire for, and I'm not saying this in any way to be dismissive to Game Changer Wrestling, their fans, and all of that, but to have like a unembarrassing grown-up wrestling hub over WrestleMania weekend, one that for people that just want to watch wrestling and want to watch like promotions that really that is their bread and butter versus just theme shows. And that's what the GCW weekends really kind of turn into. Like, would you call anything GCW did this weekend like a true out and out traditional Mania weekend supercard? I wouldn't. It was all theme stuff. So
No, because it's just to go through it. It was an ID tournament. It was the Dragongate show, which GCW is very hands off on.
mhm,
It was
Defy the next day.
Defy, Bloodsport, Spring Break, DDT, and then the collab DDT Tokyo Joshi Game Changer stuff, and then like Heels Have Eyes, and then the clusterfuck, which is aggressively GCW.
Right, yeah,
So yeah, so there wasn't the GCW supercard, for lack of a better term. Now, one could say that the Janela show this year was way less wacky than it had been. It
Fair, yeah.
almost felt like a Game Changer presents Supercard of Honor. It was as close to that as they would get with the Sabu story and with the Fuego del Sol story, but it's still Spring Break. Even if you like it, it seems exhausting. Imagine the people that don't like it and how they view that show.
Right. So I guess like the one counter and the thing you would say about at least mindset is why not have the 6-man or try to offer a 6-man for that Spring Break show. But it just so happened that Dragongate got their own show during that slot, and that in a lot of ways kind of puts the company kind of in a situation there. But yeah, really coming out of the weekend and especially seeing the variety of venues and all the various groups and then hubs that happened, I think that the big thing, other than getting to see Dragongate back in USA, is just the idea that I don't know, when I walk into one of those groups and I see, okay, it's a little Spartan, but everything is set up right and the room rocks. And before going to the DGUSA show, I saw stuff in Meet and I was like, okay, this venue rocks. Like it's going to work with that. And it's with at least someone who's operating the group with a level of care that just truly never ever came across with any sort of interactions between Dragongate and Game Changer Wrestling over the last 4 years.
No, and look, I'm sort of in this ping pong state where I want to say like, well, Game Changer tried, and I guess they did. Last year's Spring Break was a Reiwa 6 trios match against the Dragongate Classic team, which we applauded at the time for being a clever way of constructing a match with the 6 guys that were in America. But I'll never forget watching that match, which was one of the high points of Mania weekend last year, as a bell-to-bell match, better than anything on that ETU show outside of maybe Yamato versus Mike Santana. And that's if you're really high on Yamato versus Mike Santana. But the reason that 12 months removed from that match, we don't remember the 6-man, but we remember the ETU show, is that I remember watching the Spring Break 6-man and looking at the front row, the people that were there for GC Dub, and just looking at how almost like tortured they were sitting through this match. And it's guys killing each other. It wasn't a low effort 6-man tag. It was the same effort that we got Wednesday and the same effort we got Friday, and better effort than what we saw in the West Coast Pro tag this year, or the Prestige tag this year, both of which were, very good to great matches. But it was just one of those where, if you left that weekend as Game Changer, you certainly wouldn't think that the Dragongate stuff was essential to have on your card next year. Even if they had a great match, the Game Changer crowd did not care about it. And we saw that roll over into the Wednesday show this year, the rebirth of Dragongate USA, where, I don't say this in jest, but the 2 most over people on that show were Ultimo Dragon 1 and Jimmy Lloyd 2. And that is just the realistic nature of doing business with Game Changer. They are there.
They're the big fish.
They're there for their people. I don't understand it. I thank God that the Panther Brothers and Lucha Solos tag happened in front of the crowd that it did, not that Game Changer crowd. But I don't know. It doesn't make sense to me. We came away from the Dragongate USA series talking about how, Gabe, for as much as he at one point really admired the Dragongate style, and I think wanted to do right by those guys, and obviously wanted to have a successful promotion. There were things that Dragongate excels at in Japan that are just not Gabe's strengths. There's a level of polish when Dragongate is really clicking that is just not something that Gabe really has ever done incredibly well. But it's a step worse with Game Changer. They're just so idealistically separate from one another. I mean, Mike, you've heard the stories. I've talked about them, in written form and interviews. But think about the Mike Seidel Masato Yoshino story, where Mike Seidel makes one mistake on a house show and Yoshino confronts him afterwards. And think about, when I had my on-camera interview with Ricochet 6 months ago,
Please be accurate.
Please be accurate. And it's just, it's all the things that we like about Dragongate and all the things that we were excited to finally see in person, at least for me, finally see in person. They're all things that audience is just, they're unperturbed by. It doesn't matter one way or another. And so not only in the evolution of the last 20 years of Dragongate and wrestling and WrestleMania weekend as a whole, does a Dragongate 6-man tag come across a little bit less revolutionary because everybody is kind of doing some version of Dragongate. But when you have a crowd that is going to, just objectively enjoy Joey Janela versus Sabu more, and that's not a dig at Janela and Sabu, just objectively, the people that were there Wednesday in that crowd by and large were wishing that they were watching Janela and Sabu instead of Paradox and Z-Brats. And that is just a really unfortunate aspect of this relationship.
Yeah, and it's just kind of like, in a way, I think that Brett Lauderdale and Dragongate have two diametrically different ideas about what makes wrestling great, and that's fine. I mean, wrestling's a great buffet,
and objectively, you can't knock the spring break crowd, and you can't knock the Bloodsport crowd. Not only are there people into it, but on this weekend they have really become a dominant force. But as we go forward, if we continue to see aggressively splintered camps the way that we did, almost like an old Ring of Honor during at USA weekend, where you have a Game Changer DDT crew and you have a West Coast Deadlock Prestige Dragongate crew with the Luchador sort of splitting time in between, like, all right, I think that's going to be incredibly beneficial to any sort of Dragongate growth in the US. I left this weekend not seeing, and it doesn't mean that they entirely leave Game Changer in the dust, but it doesn't matter what Dragongate does if they're affiliated with Game Changer Wrestling. It will not help them grow in the United States. Those two promotions are just not interchangeable in any way.
Yeah, and I guess my greater point about like what I kind of expect and business-wise what makes the most sense is, unfortunately, still kind of tying yourself to GCW, because I mean, both of us being there now, we have the benefit of almost a week of hindsight. In a crowd of, to be, let's just say, just so we can do a good clean number, out of a crowd of 400 people, Case, I would easily guess about 250 to 300 of them were people who had the all access or all shows GCW pass. And that's an added benefit to running those shows, is that you get a crowd of that size. But I think that there has to be a recognition of the reality of, would you, and I'm very comfortable saying this, would I have rather had the crowd on Wednesday where mostly disengaged or just really into their guys that are there because it's a show that they bought? Or would you rather have about 120 people going crazy in a building that bounces back the noise and makes 120 people sound like 1,000?
Yeah, I'll take the Friday show, and it was, probably a show that peaked at around 200 people. A lot of people left to go to New Texas Pro right before the back half of that Friday show. But at one point, at bell time, the venue looked pretty dire, and then right around the Willie Mack match, the venue started to look okay, and then a lot of people left to go to another show. The one thing that Rich Creation and I were talking about is, had had the meet been set up in the same way that it was for West Coast Pro, which again, Rich and I were at, there would be way less chatter about the house. Now it would still be one where you go, hey, certainly not as many people here as there were at Prestige. Not
death slot. Like there's all the reasons why, and we are not the type of people to completely disregard it. There are good reasons why that house was low.
Yes. But it was also one where, I bought my ticket to that show that morning. I bought a front row ticket that morning, which I thought, oh, that's not a great sign. But then I also saw that they were selling 5 rows of tickets. And I thought, well, God, I think Prestige, who did great. I think Prestige only had 4 rows. Maybe this show's selling better than I thought. And then I got there. I was like, no, why do they have 5 rows of chairs out? They need 2, maybe 3. And so it was just a weird spread out show.
2 and maybe 3, and that would give the wrestlers that are there, because it became kind of the industry show if you're not doing anything better.
No kidding. What a wall of talent watching that show. But in many ways it became like the same complaint we have about Gate of Bayside, where you have a building with rough estimate, let's lowball and say 1,800, anywhere between 1,800 and 2,200 people. Why are all of the house lights on with the hard camera facing only a few rows of chairs, when if you flip around the building, you can see way more chairs? This was one where I was like, why do you guys have 5 rows of chairs out? Just remove these, because you're not filling them, and it'll look like a packed 3 rows like West Coast Pro did, instead of an empty 5 rows in the way that Dragongate did. But again, my big overarching take is like, all right, there's a pathway here if they're going to run these major weekends. Let's say even they're going to try to do something quarterly or maybe 3 times a year under that Dragongate USA banner. If they're with these promotions, I think there's something there. Now, are we comparing it to 2009, 2010 Dragongate USA? I would certainly hope not. The indie ecosystem and the way that people watch indie wrestling, the way that people care about indie wrestling is entirely different. But can everybody benefit from something like that? Yeah, I think so.
Yeah, and I think that even though there is now a bipolar kind of dichotomy in major U.S. wrestling right now, I think that the key thing is to find the weekends really where, one, it makes less sense for West Coast Pro to run Chicago during All Out. So it's going to be a bit of picking and choosing to see like which ones, whereas it makes sense that GCW runs like all fly-in shows, So there's going to be a push and pull to that, I feel like. And I mean, like, sadly, I think experience and preference is why I might not play into it too much.
Yeah. We talked extensively about the Wednesday show on Thursday morning. That's already in the Open the Voice Game podcast feed. But to just reiterate big picture thoughts, by the time that we had talked on Thursday, I had not had the chance to go back and rewatch that main event yet. The only thing I rewatched after the fact was the main event, which was the Paradox Z-Brats match. And one of the things that I wrote about in this article that'll be up on voicesofwrestling.com eventually is like, hey, okay, so you clearly have an in-person issue where a lot of the people that had tickets to this show, and I don't remember, because originally this was in a different...
Yep, it was in a nightclub that it turned out they couldn't get the ring up to.
Yes, yeah. But I think because of that, I don't think these were included in like the all shows Game Changer Pass. But the point stands, if you have that, you're there on Wednesday, you go, oh, there's more wrestling here. Okay, let me get a ticket to that. So your point there largely stands. I just want to make that minor clarification. But rewatching the match on camera, on tape, it's like watching a totally different match. It's one that in the building to me was comfortably over 4 stars, and one that I thought was really fun. And on camera, they completely lose the atmosphere. Having also gone back and watched the 6-man from the Friday show, the Friday show does a much better job of following the crowd brawling and feeling like, those cameras are a part of the action. And so it's one of those deals where, in person, it's not like they knock people's socks off on Wednesday, but also if you're somebody watching at home, like, I can't imagine going clap get into it Dragongate USA either. It's just, it's a show that I think failed in a few different regards, not because of quality of wrestling, but again, just sort of an awkward show in a building that certainly sucked up any dead noise, and there was a lot of dead noise on this show, dead air on this show. So yeah, it was just it was a very strange thing to watch back, because the atmosphere was go ahead.
I would say case, and also like the reality of I have not seen anything else that would happen after the show, but visibly during the matches, the Dragongate guys were staying away from the top rope.
Yes, no, the only time I saw KZ did the frog splash, and then Dragon Kid did the shoulder assisted Hurricane Rana from the top, in which I was afraid that he was going to die on.
Yeah, but there was like no springboards or whatsoever, or dives over, really.
No.
At least from the Dragongate guys.
Yeah, so yeah, I mean, Alec Price dove to the floor quite a bit, but that's sort of an Alec Price thing. So yeah, it's just it's one of those, like, I was shocked to see when I woke up Thursday. I was like, oh man, people like really weren't into that 6-man as much as I was. I really need to go back and watch this. So then I watched it. I was like, oh, I totally see why now. Like, they don't get, the ISHIN, Shun, Minoura interplay with the fans hardly at all. The atmosphere, which again, for as many issues as that show had creating a strong atmosphere, like by the end of that main event, the building was into it, and it doesn't feel like that on camera. You miss a bunch of the crowd brawling stuff. Like, it's just disappointing all around.
Yeah, and if anything, that might encourage people to go see the shows live instead of on stream, because I'm right now looking through the cage match stuff, and I only kind of saw clips from Wednesday on stream just because time and everything like that, and it just wasn't. I think a lot of it was that ring, and a lot of it was how everything was mic'd a little bit, from what I heard. And
it was a show in which, in the building, it's not like before match number 5, we were like, God, what a raucous atmosphere this is. The show was not lighting the world on fire, but man, watching it on camera, that main event did not get the display that it should have gotten. I was very disappointed seeing the end result of that match on tape.
Yeah, which in comparison, I have gone back and rewatched the top 4 matches from the Gate of Revolution. Guess what? Other than some white balance issues, they all held up as well as I thought in the building.
Yes. Yeah, no, I'm with you there. I rewatched the main event, and I was absolutely delighted by it.
Yeah, so let's get into this Gate of Revolution show. We'll breeze through at least like the first 2 matches. We had a pre-show, Diablo Azteca defeating Kid Lynx in Reese Maddox, 5 minutes. In the building, it was fun for what it was, but it was like a pre-show match featuring guys that were super green.
I liked the Diablo Azteca guy.
Yeah, no. He felt like the most composed out of the 3.
Also, Kid Lynx was weirdly over. I don't know why. I don't know if he's a local because he doesn't have a cage match, but people were chanting Kid Lynx in that dark match, which I was not expecting.
I found myself chanting it, at least. Yeah,
it got sucked in. All right.
Yeah. I was entertained. What I did not get sucked into, Case, was the opening tag team match. Their gear said Border Patrol, and the advertising beforehand they were called Border Patrol, but in the match and on Cage Match, they were referring to themselves as La Migra. Colt Stevens and Dave Dutra defeat Ray Horse and Vari Morales, and man, like, this was actually kind of a peak DGUSA kind of feeling, going like, we don't really want to watch this.
No, it had Too Cold Scorpio Ken Dunn energy, and it's the only flaw on this show is you have Ray Horse booked, and you put him in this match, and you put him in a match with 2 guys that I didn't think were any good, in an act that didn't really fit the tone of what we were going for here. I could see if you're working an indie show in Bakersfield, California, I could see you being
an indie lucha show, like how heelish and how over that act would be for Heat. Yeah,
I could see it working. I mean, it's a little bit,
it's 2025 and you're doing this kind of gimmick. So I mean, look at yourself and your soul for doing that. But
they were kind of less athletic Sam Adonis, where it's like, oh, in a technical sense, you are good at what you're doing. It is not.
They were decent at basing, but it just,
not at all engaging in what they were going for there. So this was the one blemish on the show, and this match wasn't even technically that bad, but it was a bummer to see Ray Horse on this show and to have him stuck in this spot.
What wasn't a bummer was pretty much from this match onwards on the show, 3-way tag they were billed as Black Generation International, which that is something that I think throughout the weekend across both shows, the amount of care we could kind of touch on a little bit here, but really was much more prevalent in the main event. Just names and calling people the wrong stuff happened a bit. I don't know if El Kukui was ever a member of Black Generation International case.
No, I'm trying to find that now, but he weirdly still doesn't have a
how does he not
profile.
have a cage match profile? But our main man, the ring breaker, El Kukui, teaming with past BGI member Oni El Bandito, they defeated La Estrella and Viento and the team of Mike Sadell and Willie Mack in a pretty fun three-way tag that you kind of came away with going like, oh yeah, Kukui and Bandito, that could be a tag team that gets play both here and in Japan.
Yeah, Bandito had a really good weekend. I liked him here, and then I really liked him on the West Coast Pro show that he worked, and that was Dragon Kid, KZ, and Yamato versus Bandito, Latigo, and Toxin.
Yeah,
Malafama. Yeah. He was really good in that match. I would argue. I guess, the West Coast Pro match was slightly better just given the positioning and some of the guys in it, but also, it was noticeable there that in that 6-man tag, I thought Bandito was kind of the one that stole the show, and then he comes here, and, it was a great weekend for Willie Mack. It was a great weekend for La Estrella. Estrella had a few big spots, and he hit all of them really, really well. But
yeah, he looked really good here.
Yeah, too. But again, kind of came away, you and I talking during the show going, Kukui and Bandito feel like an act that could catch fire in Japan. One of the things that I came away from this weekend is just if I was booking a promotion, and it doesn't really matter what it is, where it is, or the size of it, until I am burned with El Kukui, a guy that has that look and seemingly has at least the floor that he does in terms of match quality, it's a guy that I want on my shows. He is a head turner in a way that doesn't exist a lot in wrestling anymore. But every show that he worked on, every time he came out through the curtain, there were people there that hadn't seen him before that gave, the up down, like, wait, what is this? And then on top of that, he's, I thought he had a very good in-ring week.
Yeah, no, I think that El Kukui out of the PWR guys, at least both within Japan and back in the States, definitely felt like one of the guys really putting their best foot forward across all of it. And you're absolutely right. Like, I think that there is kind of like this feeling now within, at least coming back from Mania weekend, that it's like distinction and ways to differentiate yourself when you have that many wrestling shows is so important. Because I'm just thinking of on that Friday Texas Wrestling Cartel show, I still think about their local big guy named Ivan Hitt, because he was just so distinct from the rest of the stuff in that match and on that show. And I think that that's such a strong point about El Kukui. I mean, the mask is great, the bodysuit, body type, and he works in a way like a luchador Kevin Steen and circa 2009, and that's something that I want to see a lot more of in my pro wrestling.
Well, I made this comment on Twitter recently. Somebody was passing around, a Nitro Lucha 6-man, and I just made the comment. I go, man, like, I don't understand why wrestlers stopped looking like this. It was a match with Psychosis and I was going to say Felino, but he was never in WCW, but just, a lot of brightly colored 90s luchadors. And I was just thinking, like, what happened here? And then I started thinking, I go, well, I guess if I was running AEW, my first order of business, and I mean my first order of business, would be to put Lee Moriarty in a Psychosis-like mask and rebrand him, because I love Lee Moriarty as a wrestler. He clearly has a charisma issue, and that is the type of guy that should just be covered from head to toe in a crazy-looking mask and bodysuit. And Kukui has that thing where it's really eye-catching. No one has the mask that he has, let alone the body type that he has with that mask. And so I was very impressed with him this weekend. I really feel like that's a guy that, should just be on more relevant shows, because I think as long as he's not falling face first and failing in a really outward and obvious way, that's a guy that people are going to want to get behind.
Yeah, no. I feel like he is someone that if I was booking a super indie, I think he would be at least a call for my first card at the very least.
Could you imagine if this was so the 2015 Bola
Mm-hmm.
is when they booked Pentagon, Phoenix, Drago,
Aerostar. Yeah.
Aerostar. Thank you. Wow, man, Aerostar. That's a guy I haven't heard from in a minute. So like, you got to go post that Lucha Underground tag. But imagine like 2017 Bola, El Kukui, and Reseda.
Oh my God.
You know what? I'll go this far. If El Kukui works 2019 Bola, he probably gets an AEW contract. That's just the type of guy that he probably like would have got like a Marco Stunt type deal where there would have just been enough palpable buzz off of him doing PWG that he would have had to have been rewarded financially.
Aerostar most recently has worked AAA against the Tokyo Bad Boys as of March of this year.
Oh, let me tell you, writing about Dragongate USA over the last 10 years, some SB Kento thoughts on that article. What a fucking waste of a career. I was on Takuma Fujiwara's cage match earlier today, and I was just sad. I can't believe that guy's career has gone the way that it's gone. It's unbelievable. Just the complete, I don't even know of a sports comp for it. It's just absolutely awful.
Yeah. The apparently Kento's teaching in Mexico, allegedly.
Teaching people how to wrestle?
Yeah, he like did a tweet saying that he's holding a class on Mondays. Or something like that.
Oh boy. Yeah. No. They've got the WWE partnership now, so I'm sure they're eager to use a 5'3" Japanese guy and Takuma, who, looks, not to be rude, but just looks sickly every time I see him now. And actually has a really high grade fever, judging from his social media, but in the ring still looks sickly.
Yeah. Though, if I was Booker, Alec Price teaming with Takuma Fujiwara.
as what the skinny pale guys, as what the Slenderman tag team?
As like local shitheads.
Yeah, that certainly fits the bill.
One guy who has to be elated right now. Shima, there's your off ramp. Get onto that off ramp as fast as possible. Dude, he came back from his injury to wrestle in front of 90 people in Kyoto.
I know, but who are his allies there? Because Ricochet's gone, Swan's not there, Pac's not there, Tozawa's not an ally.
No, that's true.
Who in the NXT office, and this is not rhetorical because Gabe. Okay, that's his off ramp. He's got Gabe.
Yeah.
Fair play, Gabe Zapolsky.
Fair play. Let's go back to a really fun match and someone that I was really looking forward to seeing live for the first time. The Stardom offer / Joshi tag, Wing Gori, Hanan, and Saya Ida defeat Hyan and Charisma. I've never seen Hyan live, even though I've watched a lot of Deadlock and other promotions she's been at, and it is mind-numbing to me that she is not on national TV right now.
She was very good. I liked this match more than the Stardom match on Wednesday by a good margin. I was also I saw Hyan a few times over the course of the Vegas trip, and she's somebody who has worked a lot of Chicago. She's been in AEW.
Yeah. She was big in AEW when she was getting her start, right?
Yeah. And it doesn't look like she's working there anymore. But it was nice to see her. I really noticed it on the Pandemonium Pro show, and then it's, again here where it's she was kind of a young indie wrestler with potential, and so a lot of people were very high on her. But now she's just actually good. She's just a very good wrestler now. I thought I was impressed by the Stardom duo, and I was impressed by Hyan quite a bit here.
Yeah, no. And then we had a Dragongate tag team match. Ultimo Dragon teamed with his protege, Dragon Kid, to take on Ho Ho Lun and Susumu Yokosuka. And all you need to know about the differences in the ring is by the finish, Dragon Kid pinning Susumu Yokosuka after an Ultra Hurricane Rana.
An Ultra Hurricane Rana in which Susumu just about did the Dragon Kid Flamita spot where he took that one to the neck pretty hard. Going into this show, this was the match that jumped out to me a little bit as, oh man, I wish they would have done something different with Dragon Kid and Susumu. Even if it was if you wanted to bump the Border Patrol team out of there and do Ultimo and Ho-Ho against Horus and Varia Morales, okay, that's a match that I could get into. I felt like this match was hinging a lot of people that maybe decided not to go to this show because this was just not a sexy match for being the fourth match on a sixth match show or on a 7-match show. And so, luckily it didn't overstay its welcome. It was actually, at points in time with Ho Ho and Dragon Kid and obviously Susumu and Dragon Kid, it was a pretty fun match. I do think if we were going to just, analyze this to the point of, okay, how could you have maximized this weekend? I would have put Dragon Kid and Susumu in a different match on this show. My argument was, hey, put them against the Panther Brothers. As it turns out, that would have been the wrong decision. Nevertheless, a pretty fun match here.
Yeah, and we got the full Ultimo experience live and in person.
We did get that of him shooing away Dragon Kid trying to make a tag in a way that seemed very intentional and very real.
Yeah, and then waiting for the hot tag until the crowd was appropriately loud for him.
It's the thing, it might be the only thing I miss about pandemic-era wrestling in Japan, where no matter what the venue was, no matter how small the crowd was, no matter how bad the atmosphere was, in the Ultimo Dragon match, he was going to make the hot tag, and he would do what he did to Susumu here, which is not get in the ring and immediately start clapping to get the crowd into it. He would get in the ring, he would tell his opponent to stop, and then he would reset and get the entire venue clapping. And like, it was a thing that I genuinely came to admire about Ultimo was he was not going to work in front of a crowd that wasn't making noise during the pandemic. And here you see the same technique where, he completely got that crowd on his side by doing nothing.
What a worker.
What a worker.
And then we had the surprise of the night and really the surprise of the weekend for the Pro Wrestling Revolution Tag Team Championships. The Lucha Solos, Arcangel Divino and Ultimo Maldito, the champions, end up defeating Los Hermanos de la Juliga, Aero Panther and Fight Panther Jr. after probably the most damnedest 11 minutes of pro wrestling in my life.
I mean, unbelievable. And it was the type of thing, like I knew the Panthers could kill it. And our relationship with them goes back to the aforementioned SB Kento and Takuma, where
right, yeah, the Nexo titles.
Yeah, the DTU tag belts, which we thought was going to be, they had a match, and I linked this in the WrestleMania Weekend channel on the Voices of Wrestling Discord, but they had a match with Kento and Takuma. They had a few, but there was one that we all thought was the farewell to Mexico for Kento and Takuma. It was right around the time that we knew they were finishing up. They lost the DTU belts. It was like, okay, this makes sense. They gave the belts back. They had this banger of a match. They're going to go back to Japan now. Little did we know. But we knew at that point that, okay, like the Panthers can work at a high level. They could actually work with the Dragongate roster. And I mean, this match, it's not my match of the weekend, but I think it's because everybody who's watched it, I think most people that have watched it, this has become their match of the weekend. It was, to me, a true to spirit WrestleMania weekend match in which I knew the Panthers. I was unfamiliar with Lucha Solos. Most people did not even know the Panthers, and everybody came away going, we need to see these guys again.
Yeah, and it's so interesting that in the aftermath, it kind of became a little bit of an education where we discovered, like, oh yeah, this is the match that they do. But it was a perfect match for that time, and it was wild because I was like, I definitely remember Ultimo Maldito, and I actually pulled up like the quick Lucha Libre blog that I did for a year, and I was like, oh yeah, no, these two guys were all over the Crash shows in 2018 in Tijuana. And
okay.
And then it's later revealed, like, oh yeah, no, they've been street wrestling in Tijuana since they were kids. They were on the Vice documentary series, The Wrestlers. And I was like, oh yeah, no, these guys have been like actually like in the periphery for a long, long time. And what they did was absolutely just melt people's minds. And that was, as soon as I could tell that this match translated really well on stream, that's when I was like, okay, I'm just going to sit down and watch the rest of the show just because how good of a time I had and just kind of reliving that night yesterday. And boy, like, what a treat. Like, this is a match that I could very easily see 5-6 years ago going around on like a Secret Santa or a comp list for people that just blows people's minds who've never seen it. But easily, I think for the kind of show and really, like, let's be honest, Case. The PWR relationship did not excite us whatsoever. And
No, go ahead. I don't want to cut you off.
yeah, I was going to say they did not excite us whatsoever. And instead, what we got was 4 guys having the best match of the weekend out of nowhere.
I found PWR to not have held their weight in this relationship. If you go and look at their social media, they are far more focused on the Mystico booking that they have this upcoming weekend than they were on this show. And it also, I was quite excited when these guys announced they were working together, because I kind of assumed that a lot of the guys that ended up working that Martinez show down the street from where we were, a Laredo Kid or a Negro Casas, guys that had relationships with PWR, Negro Casas in particular, especially because Ultimo was on this show too, and those guys are so tight. I assumed that we would get more of that and less of the Border Patrol. And again, those are kind of the guys that stuck out like a sore thumb on this show. This is the type of thing that I wanted and to some degree expected from this relationship. But because even I, at this point, and I think I'm a pretty dialed in guy on Lucha Indies, or I should say a relatively dialed in guy on Lucha Indies. The WrestleCon Super Show, Lucha 10 Man, I know a lot of people were unfamiliar with a lot of the guys there, but I was like, yeah, of course they killed it. Like, it's, it's such and such. But here, I mean, this jumped out as a surprise. The thing that intrigues me is going forward, this is obviously in the same building as Prestige, West Coast, and Deadlock. I saw the owner of Prestige walking around the venue. I saw Chris Hero, the booker of West Coast Pro, in the venue. I did not see anybody from Deadlock there, but obviously these people are going to talk. I think if this match happens 10 years ago, say on the WrestleCon Super Show, it would have been the obvious touring match for the rest of the year. We would have seen through the end of the summer this match pop up in a million different promotions. What I'm curious now, and what I would almost expect to happen, and what I would hope to happen, is that the next West Coast Pro Show is this tag team match, and then they go work Prestige, and then they work Defy, and then they work Deadlock, and then from there you see what you have. I certainly sent a text to somebody that works with indies in the Chicago area of like, hey, if you need some buzz, I would recommend doing this, because it is that type of match where I don't know how they can build on it, but I think if you treat each indie as its own individual territory and you just do this match on all of those shows, I think that's a winning formula.
Yeah, and especially as a live dynamic, I think that it easily would kill in the building. I guess like the only the only counter is running the match essentially 4 times in 4 indies in an era where everything is available and streaming instantly.
But you know what? I thought about that, but it's not like people are fucking grinding tape on indies anymore.
That's true.
It's really. It has become very territorial. The people that are going to be at the West Coast show, the West Coast Pro Show, even though they're in the same universe now, like, I don't believe a lot of them are sitting down and watching a Prestige show.
That's fair. Yeah.
Yeah. I kind of think they're in an era right now where it's going to work to their benefit, where it's not 2016, where there's an active fervor to consume all this indie wrestling footage. I think things have really shifted to locality again, and I think they could get away with doing a match in West Coast that is 95% similar to here, which is then 90% similar to imagine, in Prestige.
No, that's entirely a fair point to have about that. Just one of those matches that if you have not gone out of your way to see, you absolutely should. And they followed that up with a match that I guess there was like buzz that it might have become a Dreamgate match. I never kind of bought into that. Instead, it was like a special singles match. Yamato versus Rich Swann. This, of course, was built up on Wednesday. Rich Swann winning his match and then coming out after the main event to cut a promo on Yamato. And the thing that stunned me, Case, watching this back, it's 12 minutes and 15 seconds. Live, it felt like a 20-minute match in like the right kind of way, where like every of the moments were like counted and you kind of went down the list there, but they managed to do that in 12 minutes 15 seconds instead.
And this is where I'll go back to the Wednesday show for just a second, and I don't mean for this to totally sound like I'm picking on Game Changer or their fans, because there are plenty of legitimate reasons to do that with, but there's not a world in which this match gets the same level of reaction or is as good if it takes place on that show. You know, one of the things that I left thinking about after being in Meat on Thursday was, man, that KZ versus Marcus Mathers match just got a bad hand. Like, that was a match that was way better than the reaction that it got in the building. And you're right. I'm shocked to hear this match was only 12 minutes, because it had a pretty slow build. You know, there was a natural escalation that occurred, but it's the type of thing where I think those first 6 minutes, you know, very basic chain wrestling, I think that dies a death in front of that Wednesday crowd. I think that dies a total death in front of a traditional Game Changer crowd. I noticed that, you know, on the West Coast show and on the Prestige show I went to, where there were just a few matches that weren't extraordinary. You know, it's not like they were Bryan Danielson Ring of Honor World title matches, but they were slower matches that built to a certain point. And I don't think a crowd, you know, a Game Changer crowd, would have had the patience to stick with those matches. And Yamato versus Swan was very much one of those kinds of matches. I also have to say, Mike, I don't know about you, in terms of foreign wrestlers, meaning American and Mexican wrestlers who have had some relationship with Dragongate in the past, Rich Swann is the biggest stock up for me of the entire weekend.
Oh, absolutely. And I feel like now, coming out of the weekend, I now have not like a expectation or a knowledge of this case, but it does have the feeling that this weekend was, okay, Rich is back and he's in a good spot and is delivering. All right, let's see when we can get him back into the rotation in Japan. Like, that was kind of a little bit of, and it might just be a little bit of wish casting, but that was kind of an energy that I kind of got around Swan, because I absolutely agree. Like, as a guy who, for a lot of people, and me included, Rich Swann fell completely off the map after he dropped the Impact title to Kenny Omega back in 2021. This weekend was a real reminder of how good he's always been. And you kind of like take a moment and you go like, yeah, especially after his promo on Wednesday, like, yeah, no, when he was in Dragongate, he was in his early 20s and now he's only like 34. And I'm like, yeah, no, I'm interested to see him back in Japan and to see especially like him and like this kind of position going back into Japan. It's something that I didn't necessarily expect going into last week, but coming out of Friday night, I now have a level of, okay, if Rich Swann shows back up, or they announce Rich Swann's coming in over Kobe World, would you be surprised now, Case?
No, and I think that's what I liked so much about his weekend, is that he seemed to treat it like a job interview. And, you know, I'm not sure at this point, with the life that he's lived, you know, I don't know if he can get in Japan. I think he can, but I don't know.
That's a fair point. Yeah.
I don't know if because of some of his legal issues, if he can. The other thing is, you know, this is a guy who, you know, has worked now at a very high level in America, and I'm not sure if he wants to go back to living in the Dragongate dojo for 2 months at a time, but
going back into the family and being treated as a family member and not as a former WWE wrestler.
But I'll say this, he certainly wrestled like a guy that was intrigued by that proposition. And I was talking to you last night. I had a very long conversation with somebody in Japan yesterday who alerted me that there's one person associated with these Dragongate USA shows that is booked in Japan for Dragongate coming up here. Now, that seems like something, just given the timeline of everything, seems like something that was a done deal prior to the matches this weekend. I don't think anybody directly earned a tour off of the Wednesday show and the Friday show and whatever else, but
right, not from what I've heard either. But
no,
yeah,
but
go along. Yeah.
You know, for pun intended, the gate does appear to be open again, and if it is, and Swan has interest, I'm now all about Swan coming back.
Yeah, and you just think about the passage of time, and it's like, all right, I think it would be hella entertaining, and maybe not like the absolute thing that Rich Swann coming back into Dragongate would want to do, but Rich Swann versus Rita is something I really want now.
Yes, yeah, oh my God, very much so.
but like he showed here that he could have the top level kind of match. Like, would I figure him into the Dreamgate situation? No, but Rich Swann coming in and challenging whoever wins the Bravegate title to Kobe World makes a lot of sense to me.
I'm with you. Again, this is a guy that wrestled like he certainly wants to be back in Japan. I was talking to somebody about how the last time that I had seen Swan, he was big. I mean, he had gotten heavy, which at any point in his career that was never his vibe. He was in impeccable shape before Dragongate, and obviously when Dragongate got him in better and better shape. But man, I was so impressed with him. I did not think he could still go at the level that he went at in this Yamato match, and that was really, really nice to see. And the other great part was when he worked the Wednesday show. I think I said this, but I'll just reiterate this. But the last Dragongate tour he worked was 2013. It was Kobe World 2013 was the last time he was in Japan. So Ben and Hyo weren't even in the dojo the last time that he worked in Dragongate. And so to see him mixing it up with the new generation, I thought was quite fun.
Yeah, no, absolutely. And this match kind of, even though I thought it was really strong, I probably would have gone 3 3/4, maybe 4 on it in the building. It was kind of the perfect, and it wasn't a full cooldown match, but it was a perfect change of pace to get us ready for the madness that would happen right after that. We had the 6-man trios match, Z-Brats, ISHIN, Kota Minoura, and Shun Skywalker going up against the united forces of Benkei and KZ and their number one object of their desire, Hyo. Benkei gets the win with the spear on ISHIN after 21 minutes of abject mayhem.
It's the most fun I've ever had watching wrestling. I don't know if there's a comparison for it. The nice thing is the crowd brawling and the overall atmosphere, I thought, transferred over to tape way better than the Wednesday match did. I was really worried that they weren't going to catch any of the stuff going on with Shun and Hyo's tail getting stuck in the lighting rig, because that became, from where we were sitting, that became an entire saga in and of itself, and the camera actually caught at the very least Shun's launch into the lighting rig. So all that stuff was captured and it came through on video and it worked out great. But look, I mean, this is going to be the expectation going forward. If I'm going to see a Dragongate USA show, I need a match this good. This is going to be the litmus test going forward. This was better than the Wednesday match. It had a better vibe. It was with a newer generation of stars. None of these guys worked the original Dragongate USA. Were any of these guys? I guess KZ was in the company during the original Dragongate USA, but was not KZ as we know him now. It was like a totally different wrestler. So
yeah, and the only time KZ worked in America before he came back over was King of Trios weekend as MC KZ with Up in Smoke.
That's right. So you're talking about exactly what I think this weekend needed, which was not only a great 6-man tag, but a great 6-man tag that wasn't with Yamato, Dragon Kid, and Susumu. I think this is a huge leg up for Dragongate in America, and it doesn't seem like, for whatever reason, again, this kind of goes to my point that I don't think people are really watching indie wrestling that aren't in the building for it at this point. I know it got some afterglow, some post-show buzz, but I'm still going to chalk this up as a match that not enough people have seen, and it's a shame, because this is a match that deserves, obviously, if you were in the building, some match of the year buzz. But I think even on tape, it sort of carries that, like, hey, is this going to be my 10th best match of the year? I think come year's end, it will be.
Yeah, and I really want to kind of double down on your point that the aura of the Z-Brats brawl was picked up perfectly. And getting to see them throughout the weekend go on and be this invading group and just cause chaos, and then on the biggest show for their promotion on this weekend, being enough mad lads to do it twice was exactly like what was wanted. And also, like, thinking about overall Dragongate USA history, when we went through it, we kind of were able to, by the end of it, and we included 2006 through 2018 or 2006 through 2008, looking at the 6-man tag, and at least for the ones that I have been in the building for, this one ranks up with the best of them. Like, Alan Farrell was talking on Blue Sky about this match, and both of us were in the crowd in Miami 2012 with the Blood Warriors versus it was Mochizuki and
Pac and Ricochet.
Yeah. So it was Junction 3 at that point.
No, so it was Mad Blanky. So it was Tozawa, Hulk, and Loki.
Right, versus the last part.
World 1 International, technically.
World 1 International / Team Veterans return.
Yes.
Yeah, but I would put this match up there with Miami 2012 when you talk about all-time great Dragongate WrestleMania Weekend 6-mans.
Yeah, you're looking at a power ranking in my mind of, I guess, 2006 by default, even if 2008 I think is the better in-ring match. And then I would have 2012 there above
Right
this match. Yeah, 2006, 2008, 2012. But I think back to the other ones, it's like, okay, this is probably on the level of 2007, better than 2011, better than 2013, and off of crowd reaction alone, better than the spring break match last year. Again, now you're talking upper echelon 6-man tag for WrestleMania weekend. So a smashing success overall. And also a match where, I think in terms of Western awareness, like I think Shun is the guy that is most associated with Dragongate at this point. So people, we talked to a lot of people that were at these shows that maybe had only heard of Shun but had never seen him wrestle before, and they were really taken by him. ISHIN, God bless him. I mean, he transferred over his charisma from Japan to America so easily, never missed a beat, looked like he was thriving. And then Ben, Hyo, and KZ were all phenomenal. Kota Minoura.
What transferred over just as well as ISHIN, I'd argue.
Yeah. Good for Hyo, because he really, I think, jumped off the page on that Wednesday show just by doing, what we recognize as his traditional comeback. But a lot of people, aren't if they aren't hip to it, in the sense that they haven't memorized, maybe they've never seen him before, period. And that really caught a lot of people by surprise. But again, here, it's much more pressure. His role was much larger, and he still kind of crushed it. And that's going to be interesting to see going, forward with the booking in Japan. Is I think we just have to be honest with Hyo, which is that he's a singles match guy that tops out at 3 3/4, and he's a tag team or a trios match guy that tops out at 4 3/4. And we should be striving to get him in the best tag team possible, because even though wrestling brain is telling us to be a star you have to be a singles competitor, I think the more multi-man matches Hyo is in, I think the more popular he's going to be.
Yeah, and I mean, this was a Hyo beatdown match, and he worked Babyface Imperial perfectly throughout it. And I didn't mean to interrupt you, like your other thoughts about Z-Brats. I know you mentioned seeing Shun live, and for people that kind of translating and becoming more impressed with that ISHIN carryover. I didn't mean to interrupt during Kota Minoura.
No, I mean, he was there.
He was getting into it. He was
in America. He got Wednesday. On the Wednesday show, he was brawling by us, and I yelled, "We like Jason Lee better," and he hit me with the crotch chop, and that seemed to awaken something in him. I'm not directly taking credit for him coming out of his shell 10 minutes into a 20-minute match, but I think it certainly did help. And, he was the sixth guy in a 6-man tag on that Friday show, and it was very noticeable to me. And that doesn't mean that he was bad.
No.
It doesn't mean that he was out of place. But he was the 6th man in a 6-man tag match, and it was incredibly noticeable that he was the 6th guy.
Yeah, whereas Ben decides to go for all of his sicko spots because he knows that it will get crazy reaction in front of people that either half of them know it's coming or the other half are like, holy shit, he just took a knee to the face.
Couldn't have drawn up a better match. I mean, this is not only the blueprint, it's now the litmus test. If you have a Dragongate USA show without a match this good, people are going to leave disappointed. This is why I'm bullish on their future in America. If they can continue to work in front of crowds like this, meaning a Deadlock, Defy, West Coast Pro, Prestige type crowd, if they can work in front of these crowds and they can have matches like this, they're going to be okay. They can have at that point. Because one of the other things, I guess we should talk about this. I want to talk to you about Dragongate wrestlers that haven't wrestled in America that should wrestle in America. But I guess we got into this a little bit on Thursday when we talked. But I guess I'm trying to figure out not only what Dragongate's expectations are in America, but what the expectation for the viewer is. Because I feel, and maybe this is me being a little too close to the sun here, I feel when Dragongate USA as an overarching concept is talked about, there's always this question of sustainability that comes with it. I think because Dragongate USA existed in a way that
and how it flamed out.
and how it flamed out. And maybe I'm off base. Maybe this is where I'm out of my depth here. But I don't feel that DDT has those conversations, and that isn't wrong one way or another. It's just weird that I do feel like there is this really heavy weighted expectation on like, well, okay, they only had 150 people here. What are they going to do next time? And, DDT has carved out a very small slice of pie in America, but it's their slice, and they know what they are, and they know how to get the most out of the 2 or 3 weekends they're here a year. I feel like that's what Dragongate should be striving for at this point, is be what DDT is, but for a different pocket of fans. To me, that's the win. I don't know how you feel about it. I don't know how the company feels about it, but I would just look at everything DDT has done, which is largely, by the way, exist off of their Laboom WrestleMania weekend show, and they've been able to sort of sustain that over the last 7 years or so. I don't know what it is that people want. I don't know what the company wants. I don't know how you feel about it. To me, their model should be, can we draw as many people as DDT in America?
Yeah, I guess, like, it's going to be really situational to me. Like, I think that, let's say, for example, someone gets a wild hair and Deadlock and West Coast decide to run somewhere in Dallas-Fort Worth over All-In weekend. I don't think that's a good weekend for Dragongate to be a part of, because you're only going to that fly-in show that you're trying to, for lack of better terms, and I hope everyone knows I'm not being negative when I say this, that you're leeching off of, you're only looking at 20,000 people. So I think that when you do like those weekends, and for like that and the people that are traveling, it's more realistic to expect for those houses to be pretty low, to be honest, if we see Friday night show as an indication, and the reliance on GCW on Wednesday as an indication as well. Do you think that's
now the Friday night show also head to head with Spring Break, which drew a massive number?
Spring Break and SmackDown.
Spring Break and SmackDown, and I know because I was with Rich for 3 days, and he was agonizing Wednesday and Thursday over, what am I going to do? Am I going to go to Dragongate? Am I going to go to Spring Break? And he had such a bad time with the Game Changer fans on Wednesday that he made the pivot to go to Dragongate. But I think a lot of people, I think the Sabu match really mattered. I think to some degree the Fuego del Sol match mattered. Right. And I think the branding of Spring Break mattered. If Dragongate is going against Bloodsport, look, they're not even. Bloodsport's still going to outdraw them. But I think there's another 150, 200 people in that building that, happens if they're not going against Spring Break.
Right, yeah. So with that, it's not that, like, I think it's like do what DDT does. I think that there is just kind of that there has to be sort of, for lack of better words, I'm just going to say it, there has to be some evaluation of which times is worth it and which times aren't. Because if you're going to hop onto every single Game Changer collective weekend, there are going to be some of those that I think you would end up in situations like Friday.
I would, if they were just going to hop on a Game Changer collective weekend, and is there one book? Do we know when the next one is? Are they running 2 this year, or is it just the Vegas stuff?
I think they
had one for the Rumble. I think that's what I'm thinking of.
Yeah, they had one for Rumble. I'm going to go to voicesofwrestling.com and the insightful and lovely Griffin Peltier's collection of what's already being announced for All in Texas at this point.
Okay, thank you. Sure. Because I guess my larger point there is if Dragongate tags along,
Game Changer is going to be in Dallas. They're going to be at Gillies.
Okay.
But it's only Game Changer. They have not announced anything else. They just have a show on Friday the 11th going up against Supercard of Honor.
Yeah, I guess I would expect if Dragongate was going to book a show that weekend, I would expect them to draw as many people as they did for the Friday show. That seems like where we'd be at for that. The thing that's been kicked around that I'm really curious about going forward now with somebody that kind of wants to go back and experience this weekend again, and am way more intrigued by the concept of traveling for this weekend than I was prior to this year, is the concept that was kicked around in the Discord today of doing, all the meat promotions, so Deadlock and West Coast and Prestige, and let's throw in Marvelous in there, and let's throw in Dragongate in there this year, all of them having their own individual show, and then ending the weekend doing a WWN Super Show type show. That to me is the most intriguing path forward. Now, that's only 1 weekend a year. That's WrestleMania weekend. I don't know, if they're looking for any sort of market permanence, Dragongate being the one looking there. I don't know what that second weekend looks like. I don't know if it's all in Texas. I don't know if it's Survivor Series. I don't know what it is. But to me, that is the model going forward, is all these promotions get their own individual show and then they come together for one super show. I would love to see that.
Yeah, I feel like that's the dream. It's going to be interesting to see how things continue from here. There does definitely, as much as I'm waving the flag, the white flag over All In Weekend, there seems to be, at least going to Vegas, that there is an appetite for Dragongate USA. And the Dragongate roster, I mean, I not to cross streams too much, but that was a show that we come up time and time again where the house is down and people go, should we really, should we take it easy today? And instead you had what at least for me, and I only really went to Dragongate related stuff. What ended up being like the best time I had all weekend was that Friday night show with 150 people in the building.
Oh, I mean, it was the best show I saw. Prestige was really good, and unfortunately I had to watch Kylie Ray wrestle, which felt like a form of war crime. But
went to the Golden Nugget.
Oh God, fucking, she's awful. But otherwise, yeah, I mean, look, this was the best top to bottom show. This was the show that had the highest peak. This was the show that had a lot of depth with those last three matches. I mean, this was a really, really good show. And so again, this is going to be the blueprint going forward. I want to just quickly touch on, because I don't think there's a ton to say about it, but you and I on Friday, we went to the Texas Wrestling Cartel show, which was fascinating on a number of levels, because Texas Wrestling Cartel is a Corpus Christi, Texas-based indie, and the crowd of maybe 100 people that made up that venue, it felt like it was about 50 people from Corpus Christi, Texas, about 50 people that were there to watch Izzy Moreno, and then me, Mike, and I apologize for forgetting the man's name, but the one guy that, as we left after the Z-Brats match and we're waiting for our Ubers, the one guy that came up to us and said, "Hey, I love the podcast. I was here for Z-Brats also." But otherwise, it was a very strange crowd. But we did see Minoura, Shun, and ISHIN wrestle Houston Hendricks and then the team of Fly Def, which was Warren J and Zach Zilla. And I'm glad we went to this, because it was illuminating to see just how, with the formula that Z-Brats work in currently, just how high that floor is. Like, Warren J and Zach Zilla, good wrestlers. Houston Hendricks, to me, not on the level of guys that should be wrestling against Dragongate guys, but just with the most basic Z-Brats formula in a crowd where no one knew who these guys were outside of, again, I think 3 people, you, me, and the other guy. I mean, a super fun match for what it was.
Yeah, and I think that match was the match that gave me the confidence that, Z-Brats very easily could be a touring invading act in the U.S. Indies, just because, I mean, 3 people out of the building were there for them, but by the end of the match, like, they did their job of getting everyone on the side of Hendricks and Fly Def.
Oh my God, I completely agree. It was, it's funny comparing it, like thinking about the fact that they had this match in the same day as the main event, which was this of the Friday show, which was this highly complex, integral, multi-act trios match. And then to just have this, which was the most basic bones trios match you can. But again, the way they're working right now, the floor on these matches is just so high. This was like a 3.25, 3.5 star match that had no business being that good, given who they were in the ring with.
Yeah, no, absolutely. And it does make you think that, hey, everything is going to really change, I feel like, over the next 2 months as we lead into Kobe World. but at least at this moment in time, there is no act in the U.S. Indies now that I'm more confident that I would send in to. It could be anywhere. It could be they could go work House of Glory. They can go work. I'm trying to think what Matthew Palmer's promotion is called. Metroplex Wrestling in Texas, and they would be able to both get over and get their opposing act over. It was really kind of fun to see. Should we drop now what we also did at that show and not wait till the end? I guess since we're still talking about it.
Yeah, because I'd like to hear you describe what the finished product is, because I have not heard it.
So part of the reason why we ended up at that show was we had a nice opportunity to interview members of Z-Brats. We ended up, just because of circumstances, getting able to sit I was going to say sit down, but we were in a parking lot in an industrial park. So
we stood in the windiest parking lot imaginable with 4 microphones and made the best of interviewing people in which we don't speak their language and they don't speak our language.
I would say, though, that we did discover, at least by the end of the ISHIN interview, that I feel like we could do 20 minutes with him and it would be great.
Hey, look, this is gonna be damning praise, or I'm sorry, not praise. What I'm about to say is not praise. This is going to be damning feedback on Kota Minoura, but I understand the situation is he has these 2 white dudes that he met in a parking lot because Ho Ho Lun said go talk to them, and none of us speak the same language, and yet the energy that ISHIN gave off compared to the energy that Kota Minoura gave off was, again, much like in the way that he was the 6th guy in the 6-man tag. It was noticeable.
Yeah, so here's the deal, folks. We conducted these interviews using translation apps, and the way that it's going to be set up, Case, and I decided to go this route after really talking about it, just because at a certain point I just wanted to stop messing around with it, to be fair. What we set up and what y'all will hear at the end of this episode, we're still going to talk about Kobe and the build to Osaka coming up next. It's coming up this weekend. But so at the end of the show, it's only 4 and 5 questions, combined 5 minutes. I could not consciously put that out in the podcast feed just by this, but the way it's going to work, and I've already gone through with the audio and it's going to sound fine, is essentially we pre-constructed these questions so that we could just ask them that, and they would see the Japanese and the English, and they were able to answer in Japanese. I went back and I was able to, through the apps and with the software, be able to translate it. And what you all will hear is them giving their response in native Japanese. And then afterwards, I will have the translation voiceover afterwards. It's about 6 minutes altogether. It really was a whole lot of fun. I really appreciate Ho Ho really helping us out a lot over the last few months in the lead up to this and getting this kind of set up. But
credit to Ho Ho, because he's the one that came up with the concept. I don't think I would have reached out to try to do this, but he brought it to us and said that he wanted us to sit down with at least some of the wrestlers throughout the weekend and
do quick questions.
Yeah, and it was just a matter of finding the right time and the right wrestlers. It was looking like maybe the guys at WrestleCon were going to be an option, but I was going to go to this Cartel show no matter what. I really wanted to see what Z-Brats looked like on this show, and we figured out like, okay, maybe the Cartel show is the best option, and Mike was able to make it, and again from there it was interviews with me typing feverishly into Google Translate an English question, copying that into the Notes app, copying the Japanese translation into the Notes app, and then showing Minoura and ISHIN, here's my question, and them doing the best they could to answer. Yes, yeah, let me read it, and then you respond, even though you don't know what I just said, and I'm not going to know what you just said. Let's make this work. I had
live translate. I was following along.
No, it was. I mean, credit to you, because the even as we got on the grounds of Cartel, the situation changed a little bit from what I was originally anticipating it was going to be. And so a credit to you for thinking on your feet and really making this work to the best of our ability, which again, these are going to be very short. I would imagine slightly awkward to listen to interviews, but they're interviews with Dragongate wrestlers, and that's always fun. And the ISHIN stuff is enlightening in terms of, I asked him, and I won't spoil his answer, but I said, a lot of American fans are comparing you to Dick Togo because of the size and the way you move. Who are the wrestlers that inspire you? And when he said his answers, it was like, oh, you're on the right path, my friend. Good for you.
Yeah, and then making ISHIN Corpse was a proud
Yes,
achievement.
yeah, well done on your questioning. That was he got a big kick out of one of the questions that Mike asked him.
Yeah, but that'll be at the end of the show. Before we move on and talk about what's been happening in Japan, also, I never caught the guy's name, but there was a nice guy that we were with that interviewed us for a Texas Wrestling and Mania documentary. I think it is.
I gotta look to see if he followed us on Twitter. I don't know what that guy was doing, which sounds mean, but he seemed ambitious in all the right ways. And interviewed me and Mike about being in Vegas and in the state of Texas indie wrestling, which weirdly we both had a ton of thoughts on. Okay, I don't see this guy yet. I'm hoping he comes back because we gave him the VoiceGate Twitter. So yeah,
but
interesting.
As soon as we have some sense about that, we'll let everyone know all about that. But Case, stuff did not stop in Dragongate. The World Dragongate.
Can I throw one more Dragongate USA thing at you?
Absolutely, please do.
It's something we've discussed a little bit, but coming away from this weekend, I want to reframe this question. Going forward, let's give the hypothetical of, okay, Dragongate's going to come back in September to America. And again, that's hypothetical. I don't know when their return date is, if there is a return date, but let's say they're coming back in September and they have enough time to get visas to whoever needs visas. I'll throw you my list in completion and full. I'm curious to see if we maybe share the same exact wrestlers, but I have 5 wrestlers that I would want to see in America. Are you ready for this list?
Yes, go right ahead.
I would have it number 1, Jackie Kame. I'll spoil it. Kame, Rita, and Junior would be my top 3, and I could even drop. I think Junior would be the least essential because I do think, based on what we saw with the Z-Brats versus All Stars match on that Friday show, I think the next move has to be doing Z-Brats versus Gold Class, assuming both of those units still exist in the current shape and form that they're in, and I think doing Z-Brats versus Ben and Jack and Rita, or Ben and Jack and Junior, or Ben and Rita and Junior, I think that's the money match. I think Rita at 5'1", wrestling the way that he does, and Jack with his charisma and the way that he chops people and the way that he's crazy athletic and can put together a finishing stretch. To me, those 3, I think, are vital to any sort of buzz that Dragongate would get going forward. Jason Lee, I obviously have on this list, and I'll ask you this question, not rhetorical. Mike, think about how good those Z-Brats matches were that we saw in Vegas. Wouldn't they all have been better with Jason Lee in Kota Minoura's place?
I mean, yeah.
Yes.
You're right.
Yes, it's some eye-opening stuff with Kota Minoura. And Kota Minoura wasn't...
Or Johnny Valletta, to be fair.
So I thought about Valletta, and I just don't trust American crowds with that act. A GCW crowd might try to fight him, or they might just sit on their hands. It's the other thing. Yeah. It's like I don't know what the reaction is there. I don't trust an American crowd with him. So I went Kame, I went Rita, I went Junior, I went Jason, and then the 5th spot, I kind of kicked around a few different names. I landed on Dragon Dia. He's doing WXW in the fall, and I just kind of think he's ready for an American tour, and I would like to see what he can do in this sort of environment. Because we're used to Dragon Dia. We've watched his entire career. A lot of people have now seen him in New Japan, but he's doing a marginalized version of himself in New Japan. I think if you let Dia loose at this point in America, I kind of think it would blow people away.
Yeah, especially like his smoothness and the way that he is able to kind of get to like the traditional junior high flying moves in a different way. I feel like that could blow people's minds. So by and large, I would co-sign your list. Like I was doing it mentally in my head and I was like, fuck, he said the other Gold Class guys. Fuck, he said Dragon Dia. And this kind of is a little bit about Kobe. The wrestler that at least I find myself more and more, he blows me away like each time, is I want to, and it might be too early for him, I want to send Hamare to the United States.
Well, that's a perfect transition to this Kobe show because
I was thinking so. Yeah.
Our guy is on one. Let's start there.
Yeah, so we've had the Open the Brave Gate Championship title tournament go on during the last few weeks. We did not touch on the Hakata show where they had Rita lose to Ryoya Tanaka with a springboard spin press, and then Hyo putting away Rhea Fuda with the Samson driver. As we moved into Kobe, it was time for the other half of the tournament, and easily the match of the tournament so far, quarterfinal matchup, Hamare versus Jackie Kamei. Hamare wins with a Momo latch after kicking out of the JFK in a really hot match that I think I'm going to say something that I think is kind of bold, but it seems kind of obvious. Hamare is the most improved wrestler in Dragongate in 2025, and that's just because they let him wrestle now.
That's an interesting angle I hadn't thought about. As I sort of look at the roster here real quick, I don't know if I have an immediate argument against that. I guess Strong Machine J would really kind of be the only other guy that would be in contention, because I wouldn't say that Hyo's improved. I think Hyo's had a good year just being Hyo.
But you would have Jay missing a full month after his title match and then just picking up right at Ray J Parejas is more improved. Yeah.
But the thing with Hamare, I'm completely fascinated by the way that they've handled him, in the sense that, again, the debut was so electric, but after that, the training wheels were on in full force for the longest time. I mean, really through February, through the beginning of Ray J Parejas, and they've let him go since. And I mean, my God, I was not prepared for what this match was going to be. And obviously I liked it on paper, but man, I was not ready for that.
Yeah. And it was just over 13 minutes, this match itself. And it was really just remarkable, just the physicality that they started off working with. But then, in a lot of ways, Hamare proving to be the perfect complement to Kamei that we really haven't seen since Kento went and tanked his career.
Yeah, the Shawn Michaels, Shelton Benjamin super kick spot they did was...
Yeah, the anti-air.
Yeah, it was incredible. I mean, again, this is one of those things where you look at it, it's like, all right, so Kamei's, in the context of this company, a borderline veteran now. This is his 5th full year in wrestling, but Hamare is a guy who's been in the company, 9 months, and the fact that he's doing this at this level of precision is pretty incredible.
Yeah, and I think, the thing that really kind of stuck out to me after I watched this match and had some time to process it, it's interesting to me that as a singles wrestler, Jackie Kamei's best matches are in this same building that we've seen Ray J Parejas, Hamare have a breakout night doing tag team work, and then the next month follow it up with the easily the best singles match of his career. And it's just kind of an interesting bit of synergy that both of these guys seemingly have a special level of juice in Zambo Hall.
Well, I think it also speaks to the fact that this building hasn't been a complete albatross this year. We've been treated to pretty good shows here.
Right, and I think that with how their scheduling has been, and you really have to have a reliance on this hometown show this year, because I mean, Hakata, the stuff in Hakata overall, when I caught up on it, was good, but really it was setting the stage for the stuff that happened here in Kobe. And really it's become pretty clear, at least in 2025, that if you are trying to be an in the weeds Dragongate viewer, you have to watch the Kobe shows now. Every month when a Kobe show happens, not only because you have matches like this, but right after this, in the semi-main event and then the main event, essentially the cards are all set for Dead or Alive now coming out of this show.
Well, I feel like, we made this point 2 weeks ago where I was like, man, I don't feel like the Decourage thing is getting all the love that it deserves, because it's a pretty intricate storyline at this point. And there's been a lot of, curves along the way. And part of that is the angles in the Decourage feud haven't really happened in Corkin. They've kind of been everywhere else. And here, we got what I thought was an incredible Decourage tag match. I'm better than Kamei and Hamare, which was very, very good. But I went notebook on the Decourage match.
I was 3 3/4 on it. It was, what's the thing that stopped me from it? Tanaka had a rare off night.
Yeah, Okay, so that did not bother me as much as it did for you. I did notice that he maybe wasn't as crisp as he normally is, which is interesting timing, because I think we're about to see Tanaka play a really big role in this feud at Dead or Alive, and then he's going to go to the UK, and then I think from there, I think we're going to be witnessing a different Ryoya Tanaka going forward.
Oh yeah, no, it's very clear that, and we've known now for months that Tanaka had that UK tour coming up in May, but it was just like you have this really fun dynamic in this match where Madoka Kakuta works as close to tweener as possible, especially getting all of his frustrations out at Yoshioka, and that all works really great because of everything that we've seen since Yoshioka returned during Rey de Parejas. And you had this moment where Daya was kind of big brothering Tanaka, and then Tanaka was making his comeback, and it just was like Daya had to stand still for a second as Tanaka had to regain his footing, and it was just a single blip that, for me, it resonated with me enough to cap it at 3 3/4.
I was thinking about Tanaka, and the end of May will mark 2 full years in his career, and as we enter this separate era of Dragongate, detached from the first 15 years of the promotion's history, I started looking at what some of his contemporaries would look like. And it's, with Ben K 2 years into his career, he's wrestling for the Dreamgate belt. And Shun Skywalker 2 years into his career, that's when he really broke out with the All Japan Junior Tag League. Kota Minoura, you look at 2 years into his career, it's the pandemic push. He gets pushed right out of the gate after the pandemic hiatus and ends up winning a Twin Gate belt that year. Jackie Kame, if you want to put 2022 as his 2-year mark because he debuts at the end of 2019, now you're talking about a guy who's winning the Twin Gate belt at Kobe World in one of the most iconic matches in company history. There does seem to be a pattern of the tippy top guys. Something happens 2 years into their run. That's really when we start to see a glimpse of like, hey, if they're going to be somebody, if they're going to be somebody that's valued long-term on this roster, it's going to happen 2 years in. And Tanaka is very much being positioned as somebody that I think has been well-liked and has performed incredibly well over the course of the first 23 months of his career. I think when he hits month 24 and beyond, I think we're going to see a noticeable change in how he's presented.
Yeah, I am excited for him to have this excursion, but there is the thought back in my mind is things are going to be really different with Ryoya as soon as he comes back home. And really with now, so coming out of the match ends up being Kakuta penning Yoshioka after the rolling lariat. It seems like Kakuta was not willing to kind of let things lie after the match, but Tanaka basically says, you all need to be adults. I want you all to fix this. I'm going right now. And it does kind of feel like, in a way, you've now put Tanaka on that island that your eyebrow has to be raised with him in terms of the cage match at Dead or Alive.
Yeah, let me read the rough translation that I got from somebody here. Ryoya, hold on, I'm gonna do this live on the air. It's gonna take me just a second to figure out where I want to go with this. Ryoya cut the promo of his life and ended it with what should be his catchphrase going forward. And then we got into really granular Japanese dialect talk, but all that matters is Tanaka cut a great promo after this match. And then in storyline, Kakuta apologized for everything. Then Daya said he was sorry for everything as well and didn't help anything. This person said they don't remember if Yoshioka said anything, but they all made up and designated Shun Skywalker as public enemy number 1 going forward, which, man, does that feel like a red herring that Shun Skywalker might not be public enemy number 1 for everybody in D-Courage.
Yeah, no, that makes me think immediately that Ryoya Tanaka is gunning for one of the other 3.
Mm-hmm. I would agree with that. I think when I start to think about the way that this cage could take place, it feels like we might be ripe for something that I don't feel like we've seen in the last few cage matches, which is a turn at the top of the cage with Tanaka on the outside, seemingly assisting one of his D-Courage teammates, and Boyer, one of his D-Courage teammates, going to learn the hard way that Ryoya Tanaka is no longer on their side.
Yeah, no, that is very true, and it'll be interesting to see how this is followed up on in Osaka this weekend. But the main event for the Kobe Sambo Hall stop this month was for the Dream Key and the slot against Yamato at Dead or Alive. This was set up in Hakata, where Luis Mante, after winning an 8-man tag, made a challenge, and that brought out Jason Lee to say, hey, you're not the only one here who's making a challenge. And what we saw really in this match, and I think it's kind of noticeable here and it's worth noting, is during Kame and Hamare, you had all of Z-Brats there with him, but they were hands off. There was no bits of interference or anything like that. Well, that was not the case for the main event because this was a Z-Brats fest, opening it up, but it finished off with Jason doing a distraction low blow, kick out, and then the Hirobi ripcord knee to pin Luis Mante, getting his first Dream Key and getting that main event Dreamgate slot at Dead or Alive. And he proclaims that it is his goal to be another 2-belt champion within Dragongate.
I'm going to tread lightly with what I say here based off of a conversation I had that implies that Mante will be okay in the long run. I'm not worried about the prospects of Luis Mante long-term in Dragongate. But man, was it noticeable to me, maybe it wasn't to you, but it was to me, that this crowd was not exactly into the Luis Mante comeback against all of Z-Brats. And in fact, the crowd seemed quite happy when Jason Lee was the guy that left with his hand raised.
Yeah, there's an interesting energy with some people on the roster right now. And Mante definitely feels like one of them, but it also kind of feels like for Mante that, yeah, he's full-time, but I would not be surprised that maybe he's getting a bit of a break and coming back as we get closer to Kobe World Season 2.
Possibly right after Kobe World?
But I mean, that makes a lot of sense to me. The other person that noticeably has been downcycled is Junior. But you're sorry to cut you off there. It's the first time in his career that he's not actively doing anything, but he's taking all the falls, and he got laid out by Hamare after the match with Kame.
Which is an interesting thing to note. But for as good as Junior is, and it's not like he's regressed in any way. But again, this gold class unit, Ben's hot, Kame's hot, Rita's hot, Junior's the fall guy. I almost think it might be more beneficial to just completely take your foot off the gas with Junior and have him be a designated fall guy, as long as there's, he's not in a spot right now where there's any upward mobility for him in the immediate sense. By Kobe World that might change, but they've got nothing for him now. I don't need to have Junior hope. Just beat the guy like a drum and heat him up later.
But doesn't it seem like, that's all fair and good. And when you look at the seniority within gold class, him and Rita are essentially the same level of seniority. So that does make sense of that. But doesn't it feel kind of pointed, the fact that he was not in the Bravegate tournament and someone like Maria was?
Had Maria not wrestled in Kobe, I would have said yes.
But I mean, looking at the rest of us, like Hyo, yes, this is like his natural kind of slotting. Does he feel like he needed to be in this tournament more so than Junior at his spot?
Well, so I see what you're saying. I don't even think you're wrong for saying that. Had Maria,
it could very easily be that he's no longer under 83 kilos.
That's also a possibility. Look, had Maria and UT had this match in Fukuoka, I would have gone, oh, that's really weird. Does Hyo need to be in this tournament? No, absolutely not. But they've got to do something with Hyo through the May Corkin, and this tournament. At the very least, the match with Fuda, the match we'll have with Hamare, and possibly the match we'll have at Dead or Alive, although I would assume that he would lose to Hamare. That's something for Hyo to do on televised shows that doesn't involve him having a unit, so you get a safety valve there. And Maria wrestling in Kobe is Maria wrestling in Kobe. Again, I think that's way stranger and way more noticeable if that doesn't happen in this specific building.
Yeah, and I think those are valid points. I just think when you have certain data points kind of aligning at a certain point, it would be... I feel like you have to recognize a trend, and it does feel like that's a trend for him right now.
I would agree. No, this is, look, it'll be 3 years in June. This is the first time that he's not actively a part of any storyline.
Yeah, and I guess also with the fact that Ben was gone, he was really not left with anything to do because Kame and Rita were in the tournament too.
Yeah, absolutely. Can I talk about Gianni Valletta real quick, or am I going to throw you off?
Oh, no, go right ahead. Johnny Valletta versus Don Fuji. The heated match is happening at Edion Arena 2 on the 26th.
I'm utterly obsessed with what they're doing with Valletta right now. This is as challenging for me to not have YouTube uploads as, Dead or Alive last year kind of marks the end of those. And this is other than King of Gate, this is as much as I've struggled because they've been running Valletta versus hometown guy. So they did Valletta versus Susumu in Yokosuka, and then they did Valletta versus Genki and Kumamoto. And then, this is one of those things that it wasn't made a big deal of, but they did this intentionally. They did Valletta versus the Kung Fu Warriors in Kobe, the only city in which this unit exists. They do it there. And then he's going to wrestle Fuji in Osaka, and I'm gonna predict right now that he will be wrestling Dragon Kid and Aichi.
Yeah, no, that there's a part of me that goes like, who is bigger than that? Do we need to have him versus Ultimo and Nagoya?
No, we don't.
but no, you got to be up Dragon Kid in his hometown.
That's absolutely. I think the way they've handled him has been so much fun, and it kills me that even in really in touch smart people aren't being like, hey, you know what's awesome? The way that Dragon Gate of all promotions is booking Gianni Valletta, because the way that they're booking Gianni Valletta is awesome. And I love this hometown stuff. And I was devastated that Jade told me that the Susumu match got rave reviews from those in the building. I'm really, really sad we did not get to see that match. I look forward to the Fuji match, and I assume we're getting the Dragon Kid match at Dead or Alive.
Yeah, no, I'm with you on that. The other Bravegate quarterfinal, UT versus Yosuke Santa Maria in Kobe. This was the battle of the former millennials, and we got a millennial era finish from UT. He advances on the tournament with the Rotacion, which is a danged Canadian destroyer. This was more fun than good to me. I appreciated that we had grappling early, and Maria is such a classic babyface, especially in this building. But when you have that match right before Hamare versus Kamei, one match is going to feel like it jumps off the page, and the other one was just a good time.
I think there's a very small audience of people that would be really into UT versus Maria in 2025, and I think two of those people are on this podcast right now.
Right? Yeah, it was a great time.
Yes.
It was
a great time. It was a great time for us. This match kind of died a death in Kobe, I thought, for what was otherwise a pretty hot crowd.
Yeah, no. More Maria calls in UT, notably. And that was Kobe. There was a couple undercard things we touched on. Johnny versus Kung Fu Masters. Really, the only other kind of match that was fun on the card was the opener. Junior.
Yeah, that's right. And Junior was in this. This was a fun. Yeah. Junior and Rita versus Daiki and Fuda was really fun. This was a good show. Again, the Kobe shows this year, away from the Art Center, the Sambo Hall shows have been really good.
Yeah, and I say Junior's getting downcycled. He gets the bully Daiki, which is great, and right into the finish before the Retanic, he goes and hits a picture-perfect Bermuda Triangle to the outside to wipe out Fuda, who now has pants.
Yeah, if you're somebody that's feeling good about Dragon Gate coming out of Vegas, watch. Skip the Battle Royal. The Battle Royal is meaningless on the show. Watch the rest of the show. This was a really good show.
Yeah, the only notable thing about that Battle Royal, Strong Machine J was the only young guy in it. It was all veterans other than that, but that meant that Strong Machine J was very dominant and got eliminations over both Kagetora and BB Hulk, and he called out Paradox for the Triangle Gate shot at Dead or Alive. For Natural Vibes, it'll be Strong Machine J, KZ, and the returning Flamita versus the Triangle Gate champions Paradox, Susumu Yokosuka, Kagetora, and BB Hulk.
Fun.
Yeah. It was fun, and given that you're arguably 5 of your top 9 draws aren't there, it made sense that you kind of did like that. We got Shenlong too, so I mean, everyone was out there. The stars were out tonight. Only Kenichiro Rai staying at home.
Yeah, no. I was gonna say no Genki, but Genki was on the show. Yeah, no, they really had to max out the roster here.
Yeah, and that was the card that was in Kobe on the 19th. We do have a show coming up this week in Osaka that after this, we'll probably have the full picture for Dead or Alive. I'm going to run through the card real quick, Case, before we get out of here.
Yep, go ahead.
So we're opening with Strong Machine J and KZ versus Yokosa Chome, the original Jimmys, Susumu Yokosuka and Kagetora. 8-man tag, Ultimo, Masaki Mochizuki, Luis Mante, and Toru Owashi versus Gold Class and Hyo, Benkei, Rita, Jackie Kamei, and Hyo all building up who wins Hyo's infections. We get our semifinals of the Open the Brave Gate Championship Tournament. On one side, you have Ryoya Tanaka versus UT. The other side, you have Hyo versus Hamare. Match 5, you have Paradox Yamato along with Not Hug. Not Hug did have a reunion on the 13th. That was a good that was a good time. But it's a Dreamgate preview match as Yamato, Dragon Kid, and Naruki Doi go up against Jason Lee, Kai, and Ishin. The aforementioned special singles matches in the semi-main event case, Don Fuji versus Johnny Valletta. And then we have some cage match build as the original incarnation of D-Courage, Yuki Yoshioka and Dragon Dia, go up against Shun Skywalker and Kota Minoura for the main event in Edion Arena, Osaka, number 2 on April the 26th.
I think back about the last 5 years of this promotion, and there have been times where on a show-in, show-out basis, we're getting better wrestling. But man, I just like this promotion right now. I think the booking, by and large, is really strong. And I'm going to be curious to see if this show does a good house. I know New Japan did 800 in this building. We'll see what Dead or Alive does. I kind of can't believe this promotion isn't hotter because I think they're doing a lot of things at the top end of the card, which had been the weakness of this promotion since 2021. I think they're doing a lot of things at the top end of the card that are really good, and I would really like to see them start drawing in a noticeable way.
And it's worth noting, this is the last time they'll be in this building until July.
Yes.
I don't know if that's going to be a part of the Edion Arena Osaka repairs, but it's noticeable that they're not going to be stopping there either in May or June, just in the lead up to Kobe World, actually a week before Kobe World.
Yeah, there you go. Yeah, they're sometimes get that end of that end of May show because that's when Tanaka debuted 2 years ago, and that is not on the May calendar this year.
Nope, we got 2 days in Okinawa. They have that Hell Week again, man. It starts off in Okinawa, and then they have to go. They get 2 days off essentially for travel, and then Yokohama, a day to travel up to Hokkaido for 3 in a row, and then the day afterward in Hakodate, and the day after that in Iwate.
That's not a fun week.
That is a rough period of time. But Case, I think that's all we have this week for the program. Was there anything else you want to touch on before we got out of here?
No, sir.
Well, we will be back with you next week talking about Osaka and the lead up to Dead or Alive 2025, Dragongate's farewell to Dolphins Arena in Nagoya, Aichi. You can follow us on social media at Open Voice Gate. Case is at _in your case on Twitter. I'm at Fujiheya. You could join the conversation in the Voices of Wrestling Discord, where we have a really fun and active Dragongate channel with people that go to the shows also in Japan as well. A lot of good conversation there, as well as the Open the Voice Gate channel on the Voices of Wrestling Discord. That's where, for those days, we put up all of our match listings, and if there's any production notes or scheduling things, those usually go in there first. But Case, I'm going to pitch it to us last week behind the Texas Wrestling Cartel show and our short little interviews that we had with both Kota Minoura and ISHIN. Thanks to both of them for their time and joining us on the show. But we'll be back with you next week. Take care, everyone. Hey, everyone. We're going to start off with Kota Minoura. And like we said before, the way it's going to go is Case or I ask the question, and they give their response in the native Japanese, and I'll hop on with the translation after we kind of finish that question.
All right, I'll ask the question on the microphone and then show Kota a question.
Yeah.
So the first thing that I'm curious about is, what are your thoughts on working in front of American fans?
まあ、いつもの日本と違う大会なんですごいやってて、お客さんの反応もすごく楽しいです。
It's a different tournament from the usual Japanese ones, so it's a lot of fun to see the reaction of the audience.
One of the things that makes you a great wrestler, great technique you have, very, very tight, very firm, very crisp. American wrestlers, how do you feel they're different from Dragongate wrestlers?
まあ、日本と違うことをやる人が多いので、やっぱりこういろんなテクニックを自分も学べる機会なのですごいいい。
Many people do things differently than in Japan, so it's a great opportunity for me to learn various techniques.
いいです。
And then I have one more. Kota Minoura, many good matches. You and KZ tag team with Jason Lee, very good. Do you have a favorite match that you've participated in?
最近だと、ツインゲートタイトルマッチ、タッグリーグ決勝。
Yeah. Yeah, good one. Good one. Very good.
Very good. Very good. Sorry.
No, all good.
Very good. Very good.
Do you have any, Mike?
Yes. Most recently, my favorites have been the Twingate title matches and the Tag League finals. Since your debut, we've seen you have immediate success while remaining one of the roster's Iron Man. What has helped and aided you to achieve this success so early in your career?
まあ、リング上で戦える体作りとか、まあ、その技術とか周りよりもその努力をして、まあ、他と差をつけようっていうので頑張ってきましたね。
I've been working hard to make my body and skills to be able to fight in the ring and to be different from others by working harder than the others. And here is our interview with ISHIN.
And Las Vegas, good?
Very good.
Exciting. Yes, lights, bright, very loud. A lot of wrestling fans are comparing you to Dick Togo in the way that you wrestle. Do you have any inspirations of people you try to wrestle like?
僕が好きなレスラーやっぱパワーファイターが好きなので、
Shingo Takagi, Power Fighter.
新日本高木さんとか石井さんとか、
BJW
の人、
関
本さんとか、ミーライクですね。すごい好き。
My favorite wrestlers are power fighters, so I like Takagi-san and Ishii-san from New Japan and Sekimoto-san from BJW a lot. I really love power fighters.
Awesome.
Power fighter love.
Good. You have brother Ricky Hashi.
Yes.
Can I ask how is Ricky doing?
元気です。普通に仕事してます。
Good.
Oh, he's fine. He has a regular job.
Final question from Mike. People really like your match with Yamato, Cork and Hall. Do you have favorite match that you've had?
僕のお気に入りは去年の11月ノーベンバーの後楽園のキングオブゲートのファーストマッチ、望月ジュニアとシングルマッチ。
Bring Junior to America.
Yes. すごいお気に入りの試合。
Junior versus ISHIN.
お願いします。
Yes, very good. Do you have any questions?
Yes. So my favorite match is the first match of King of Gate at the November Korakuen last year. It was the Fast Mochizuki Jr. match. My favorite awesome match. And to be honest, on this last question we had for ISHIN, I'm not going to bother coming back for translation because it doesn't really need it. Other than Cristiano Ronaldo, what other celebrations might we see from you?
Cristiano Ronaldo only. Sorry. I don't know soccer player.
Good celebration though.
Yes. Japanese idol move. Okay. Sorry.
Good.
Do you like wrestling trivia? Then check out the 5-star match game, the Pro Wrestling Quiz Show. I'm Joe Gagney, and every episode, I grill 3 contestants with 5 rounds of power-packed wrestling trivia. We have over 30 evergreen episodes in the archives covering WWE, AEW, Japan, Mexico, and much more. Play along at home and check it out today.